be the type to spill my guts on the internet, but here I am. There's a lesson in what I'm about to tell you, and maybe, just maybe, it'll save some of you from making the same mistakes I did. This isn't some fiction I've cooked up to entertain you. It's my life, my reality, and it's ugly as hell. But if sharing it keeps even one person from being as blind and clueless as I was, it's worth it. Let's start with the greeting, though. Hi, I'm the guy who got his life turned upside down because of a stupid joke. Yeah, you heard that right. A fucking joke revealed that my wife, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was screwing around behind my back. But before I dive into the heart of that shitstorm, let me introduce myself properly, give you some context. You'll need it to understand just how badly I got played. I'm in my early 40s now, a brunette with a couple of grays creeping in. Thanks, life. I'm not a model or anything, but I'm fit, take care of myself. I've got a job that pays well enough, project manager for a mid-size firm. We're not swimming in cash, but we've never had to worry about bills either. I always thought I was doing okay, providing for my family, keeping the ship steady. But man, I had no clue what was brewing underneath the surface. Now let's talk about her, Emma. We met about 13 years ago, and when I first saw her, I was floored. She's blonde, tall, with these sharp, striking features. Emma is the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room, and trust me, I wasn't immune to that. I fell hard. I thought I hit the jackpot. She had this magnetic energy, always wanting more out of life, always striving for something bigger and better. I liked that about her at first. She pushed me, made me feel like we were building something together. But as the years went on, it became more obvious that bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her. More attention, more compliments, more things. Expensive things, too. She loved designer bags, new phones, jewelry. I'd get her some of it when I could, but the truth is, I could never really keep up with her appetite. Emma didn't work for the first few years of our marriage. She stayed at home with our son while I was out busting my ass to make ends meet. But when he started school, she got a job at some high-end gym as a personal trainer. Seemed harmless enough, right? I was just glad she had something to do other than spending money and complaining that I didn't have enough time for her. Now about her son. He's 8 now, and let me just say, I love that kid more than anything in this world. He's got red hair, which is the punchline to the joke that kicked off this whole mess. See, I'm a brunette, Emma's blonde, and our son? He's got this fiery red hair that doesn't match either of us. Sure, I know how genetics work and all that, but it's become a running joke between us. I make cracks about him being the neighbor's kid, dumb stuff like that. Hey, maybe the mailman's got some explaining to do, I'd say, and Emma would usually laugh or roll her eyes. But this one time at dinner, I dropped the usual line. Maybe I should go have a talk with the neighbor about our redhead, I said, half laughing as I shoveled food into my mouth. It was supposed to be one of those harmless, tired jokes, the kind that lands flat because you've said it a million times. Only this time, Emma's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't laugh or roll her eyes. No, she froze. Just for a second. But it was there, a flash of something. Her smile dropped for a millisecond before she forced it back up. I swear, it was like someone had hit the pause button on her face. I don't know why, but that look got stuck in my head. It was like I had hit a nerve, but I wasn't sure how or why. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, I started noticing more little things. And when I say little, I mean tiny. Things you wouldn't normally even register if you weren't already suspicious. Like how her phone was suddenly glued to her side all the time. Sure, we all have our phones on us, but Emma used to leave hers lying around without a second thought. Now, it was always in her hand, her pocket, or face down on the table. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it like it was a ticking time bomb. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Work was stressing me out, and I hadn't been home as much as I should have been. Late nights, early mornings, I was busting my ass to keep everything afloat. Emma had always complained about how much I worked, but in my mind, I was doing it for us. For her and our son. I figured the distance between us was just because of my job. But looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs sooner. And then there were the girls' nights. They weren't new. Emma's always had a circle of friends she'd go out with now and then, but they were happening more often. And she'd come home later and later, sometimes a little too drunk for just a casual night out with the girls. I'd ask her how it was, and she'd shrug it off like it was nothing. Just the usual, she'd say, maybe tossing a name or two of people I didn't know. I didn't push it. Why would I? She was an adult, and I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. See, here's the thing about trust. Once you get even the slightest reason to doubt it, you start questioning everything. You start playing detective in your own head. I'd lay in bed at night, thinking about that damn look on her face when I made the joke about our son's red hair. Was there something more to it? Was she hiding something? Or was I just being a jealous, insecure asshole? Now, you might be wondering about my friends Tom, Bob, and Rick. We've known each other for years since college, and they've always had my back. Every couple of weeks, we'd take off for a few days, just to get away from the grind. We'd go fishing, hiking, sometimes even just rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was our time to decompress, do some manly shit, and forget about the rest of the world for a while. Emma hated those trips. Every single time I'd pack my bag, she'd throw me this look like I was abandoning her. "You're going off with your buddies again?" she'd say. "What about me? What about your family?" And maybe she had a point. Maybe I was selfish for wanting to escape now and then. But those trips kept me sane. They were my outlet, my way of blowing off steam, so I didn't lose my mind with all the pressure at work and at home. Besides, it's not like I was disappearing every weekend, just every couple of weeks. I thought it was harmless. Except, while I was off with the guys, she was back home doing, well, who knows what at the time. I didn't realize it then, but she wasn't exactly sitting around waiting for me. Now, I've always had a messed up sense of humor. It's gotten me into trouble more than once, but it's also saved my ass in some pretty tense situations. Little did I know, it was about to be the catalyst for unraveling my entire marriage. So, after that little dinner table moment, where Emma froze after my dumb joke, I started getting this itch in the back of my mind. It was like a splinter I couldn't shake. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid or if something was actually wrong, but it got me thinking about relationships, cheating, and all that shit that never used to bother me. One night, I'm scrolling through YouTube, trying to unwind after a long day at work. That's when I stumbled on this video. Some guy pranking his wife by pretending he was cheating on her. The guy just casually drops a fake confession and records her reaction, which, as you can imagine, was pretty over the top. She freaked out, started screaming, throwing stuff. The whole thing was supposed to be a joke, a way to get a rise out of her. And by the end, they're both laughing it off. For some reason, I couldn't stop watching it. It was dumb, but it stuck with me. Now, here's where my own brand of stupid comes in. I started thinking, what if I did the same thing with Emma? She's always been jealous, not of my friends, but of this imaginary harem of women she thinks I'm hooking up with whenever I'm out with the guys. I mean, every time I come back from one of those trips with Tom, Bob, and Rick, she'd start up with the same accusations. Where'd you really go? Who were you really with? It was exhausting, to be honest. I'd try to reassure her, tell her it was just the guys, but she never seemed to believe me. The thing is, I never gave her a reason to be suspicious. I've never been the cheating type, but she was convinced that every time I wasn't glued to her side, I was off climbing into bed with some random woman. So, in my slightly twisted head, I figured, why not prank her like the guy in the video? Let her feel what it's like when the shoe's on the other foot. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. One night, after a few drinks at the bar with Tom and Bob, I came home feeling a little tipsy, but still in control. Emma was already in her usual mood, throwing passive-aggressive comments about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I just brush it off or argue with her, but this time, with the booze buzzing in my veins and that stupid YouTube video fresh in my mind, I decided to go through with it. I was going to pull off the best fake confession she'd ever heard. I quietly set my phone up on the counter, making sure it was angled just right so it could catch everything, then turned to her, pretending to be all serious. I put on my best guilty face, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to sell it, make it believable. Emma, I said, sighing dramatically, I need to tell you something. I've been cheating on you. I'll be honest, I was pretty damn proud of myself. I sounded convincing, like a real actor pulling off some Oscar-worthy performance. I thought she'd freak out, maybe throw some dishes or start screaming like the wife in the video. But no, she didn't do any of that. She just stood there, staring at me with this look I couldn't quite place. I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Then she hit me with it. Well, she said, folding her arms, I've been cheating on you too. At first I laughed. I mean, come on. We were in the middle of a prank, right? So I figured she was playing along, trying to one-up me. I even made some snide comment like, oh yeah? With who? Bob? Tom? The words came out of my mouth as a joke, but her expression didn't change. She just looked at me, dead serious. Yeah, she said. With both of them. That's when the room started spinning, and it wasn't just the alcohol. My laugh died in my throat. Wait, what? I asked, feeling like I just stepped into a nightmare. You're not serious, are you? She didn't even blink. I'm serious. I've been fucking both of them. For a moment, I thought I was still drunk, that maybe I misheard her. But no, the cold, hard truth was sinking in. I didn't know what to say, what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest. My head felt like it was going to explode. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say it was all a joke, that she was messing with me, just like I'd been trying to mess with her. But the punchline never came. I don't remember much after that. The conversation blurred into shouting, accusations, and more words that I'll probably never fully recall. The only thing I do remember is stumbling out of the house at some point, sitting on the doorstep, clutching my head in my hands, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. Because it had. That stupid prank, that little game I thought would be funny, had backfired in the worst way possible. It wasn't a joke anymore. This was my life, and everything I thought I knew about it was crumbling around me. Filing for divorce was the easy part. It was cold, clinical, and I'll admit, satisfying in a way, knowing I'd finally cut the cord with Emma. But after the paperwork was submitted, the questions started gnawing at me. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed something more, closure, maybe, or some twisted sense of justice. And I knew exactly where to start, Tom. Emma's betrayal hurt, no question. But Tom? That was a different kind of pain. We'd been friends for over a decade, ever since college. He wasn't just some guy I hung out with. He was someone I trusted, someone who'd been there for the big moments in my life. My wedding, the birth of my son, the times I thought we were solid. And now, I knew he'd been screwing my wife behind my back. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I couldn't just let it go. I wasn't the kind of guy who'd sit back and take it. I wanted retribution, plain and simple. Rick was the first person I turned to when I decided to take action. Out of our group of friends, he was always the one with the calm head, the guy who could think things through when the rest of us were just reacting. He hadn't been involved in the mess with Emma, and that alone made him someone I could rely on. After a long night of drinking and venting, I told Rick everything about Emma, Tom, Bob, the prank gone wrong, all of it. Rick was furious on my behalf. He didn't try to talk me out of it when I told him I needed to get even with Tom. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plan started to take shape. Tom had a lot to lose, more than just his friendship with me. He had a good job, a wife, and 2 kids. That's right, he had a family too. He was living this picture-perfect life on the surface, all while screwing around with my wife behind the scenes. I wasn't just going to ruin his friendship. I was going to destroy the image he'd built, the one he pretended was so wholesome and solid. I was going to show him what betrayal really felt like. The first part of the plan was simple: gather evidence. Emma had deleted most of her messages, but Rick had a buddy who was a tech genius. He managed to recover some of the deleted texts from her phone. And let me tell you, what we found was more than enough. Explicit texts, photos, plans for meetups. Tom wasn't just some casual fling for Emma. They'd been going at it for months, if not longer. Seeing it all in black and white was like pouring salt on a wound, but it also fueled the fire inside me. With the evidence in hand, I needed to figure out the best way to ruin Tom. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about hitting him where it hurt the most, his reputation, his family. That's where Rick came in. He knew Tom's wife well, had been friends with her through various gatherings and events. She was a nice woman, didn't deserve to be in the dark about who she was married to. But we had to be careful. This couldn't be some emotional outburst that backfired. We needed to be smart, calculated. Rick and I arranged a casual get-together, something Tom's wife wouldn't suspect. It was a weekend barbecue, nothing fancy, just the kind of thing our group did from time to time. Tom and his family came, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of what was coming. I watched them, and every laugh, every look of love his wife gave him, made my blood boil. I wanted to storm over and break his nose right there, but I kept it cool. I had a bigger plan. After a few drinks, Rick and I managed to slip away with Tom's wife. Let's call her Katie, for a private chat. We were subtle, didn't want to cause a scene. I could see the confusion in her eyes when we asked to talk to her alone, but she came along without questioning it too much. Once we were out of earshot, I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts, the photos, everything. At first, she didn't believe it. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her eyes blinking as if she was trying to process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Tom would never." But it was real. And Rick, bless him, was there to back me up, confirming everything, even offering to let her talk to his tech friend if she needed proof of how he got the messages. We gave her space to let it sink in, but the devastation was clear. She was a good person, someone who didn't deserve this any more than I did. But I needed her to see the truth. I needed her to know the kind of man she was married to. Katie didn't cry or scream. She was stronger than I thought she'd be. She just stood there, staring at the ground for what felt like an eternity. Then she said, "What do we do now?" That's when I told her the rest of the plan. We weren't just going to confront Tom. No, that was too easy. I wanted him to feel trapped, cornered. Katie agreed to play along, and we set the trap for the following weekend. Another gathering, but this time, it was at Tom's place. When the day came, I could barely keep myself together. Tom had no idea what was coming, and seeing him act all buddy-buddy with me made my skin crawl. We let the day roll on like normal until, finally, the moment arrived. Katie took him aside, just like Rick and I had done with her, and confronted him. The whole neighborhood could probably hear their argument. Tom tried to deny it at first, but when she showed him the evidence, there was no escaping it. And then I stepped in. I walked into the room just as Katie threw the final bomb. "Jack showed me everything," she said, her voice cold as ice. Tom turned to look at me, his face pale, his mouth hanging open. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his entire life was crashing down around him. That look, that was what I had been waiting for. The betrayal in his eyes mirrored my own. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a sliver of satisfaction. I didn't say much. There was no need. The damage was done. I just stood there, letting him see the cold fury on my face, knowing that his world was falling apart because of what he'd done. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Tom had been easy in the end. His family, his reputation, that was his Achilles heel. But Bob? Bob was a different story. The guy didn't have a family, didn't have much of a personal life, really. He lived for his career, always talking about his investments, his side hustles, and the next big score. Money was his weakness. If there was anything Bob cared about more than himself, it was his bank account. That's where I knew I could hurt him the most. After what happened with Tom, I didn't waste any time moving on to Bob. The anger that had been simmering for months was now a full-blown fire, and I was done holding back. It was personal, but it had to be smart. I couldn't just confront Bob like I did with Tom. It wouldn't have the same effect. No, Bob needed something different, something that would cut him deep, but leave no trace back to me. That's when I came up with the idea: financial fraud. Bob had always been boastful about his latest investments, always showing off the new ways he was making money, whether it was stocks, crypto, or some shady real estate deals. He loved feeling like the smartest guy in the room, like he was always one step ahead. But here's the thing: people like Bob get cocky. They think they're untouchable, that nobody can outsmart them. I was about to prove him wrong. The first step was to get Rick involved again. He had already helped me with Tom, but this time I needed his tech skills more than anything else. Bob was careful with his money, but Rick knew how to dig into the digital side of things. I laid out the plan for Rick over a few beers one night, and he didn't even hesitate. He was all in. We started by digging through Bob's public profiles, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual stuff. Bob liked to brag, so it wasn't hard to find out where he was investing and what he was excited about. He had a few properties he'd been bragging about, flipping them for profit. He mentioned some online investments as well, including a crypto exchange he was heavily into. It was a gold mine of information for us. The next step was finding a weak spot. Bob had been in some pretty questionable deals before. Things that skirted the line of legality, but nothing major enough to get him into real trouble. I figured if we could create something that looked legit enough, we could lure him in, and once he was in, he'd do most of the damage to himself. With Rick's help, we created a fake investment opportunity. We set up a slick-looking website for a fictional startup, one that promised big returns for early investors. It was the kind of thing Bob would jump at. New tech, high potential, lots of hype. We even populated the site with fake testimonials, links to dummy profiles on financial websites, and enough buzzwords to make it look legit. Then came the bake. I casually mentioned the opportunity to Bob during one of our conversations. We were having drinks after work, and he was going on about his latest crypto gains, so I slipped it into the conversation, acting like it was something I'd stumbled upon but wasn't sure about. Of course, Bob's eyes lit up. He couldn't resist the idea of getting in early on something hot, especially if I was hesitant. He thought he was smarter than me, that he could spot a good deal where I couldn't. Over the next few days, I played it cool, like I wasn't sure if I wanted to invest. Bob, though, he was hooked. He kept asking me about it, wanting to know more, pressing me for details. That's when I gave him the fake site and told him to check it out for himself. It didn't take long. A week later, Bob was in. He threw in a sizable chunk of cash, enough to make a dent in his portfolio if things went south, but not enough to bankrupt him. At least, not yet. The beauty of this plan was that once Bob was in, he did the rest of the work himself. He started pushing the investment to his contacts, trying to build his position, get others involved. That's how these scams work. The more people you get in, the bigger your slice of the pie. Bob didn't even realize he was stepping deeper into the trap. Rick and I waited until the timing was right. A few months in, after Bob had thrown even more money into the pot and was starting to see some returns, all fabricated, of course, we pulled the plug. The site went down, the company disappeared, and Bob's investment vanished into thin air. The fallout was immediate. Bob was livid, calling everyone he knew, trying to figure out what the hell had happened. He started pulling strings, contacting lawyers, but the thing was there was no trail. Everything had been scrubbed clean. The more he dug, the more he realized he'd been duped, and there was nothing he could do about it. And the worst part? He couldn't tell anyone. Bob had been scammed, and admitting that would mean admitting he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. I watched him unravel over the next few weeks. His confidence was shattered. He stopped talking about his investments, stopped bragging about his latest schemes. He was quieter, more reserved, like he'd taken a punch to the gut and was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't need to confront him, didn't need to rub it in his face. The loss itself was enough. Bob's whole identity was wrapped up in being the guy who always won, who always came out on top, and now he was just another sucker who got played. And the best part? He never knew it was me. As for Rick, he wiped his hands clean after it was all done. We didn't need to talk about it much afterward. We knew we'd done what needed to be done. I got my revenge on Tom and Bob, and the satisfaction of knowing they both paid for what they did. Was it enough? At the time, yeah, it felt like it, but in the back of my mind, I knew there was still one person left. Emma. After the fallout with Tom and Bob, you'd think the divorce process would have been the final nail in the coffin, the last chapter in a saga of betrayal and revenge. But no, that shit dragged on longer than I ever could have imagined. You see, Emma wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. She wasn't just interested in splitting up and moving on. She wanted to bleed me dry in the process. At first, it seemed straightforward enough. We agreed to sell the house, split the assets, and go our separate ways. But when it came to the money, she started playing hardball. Specifically, she demanded an obscene amount of alimony, more than I expected, given the fact that she had a job now. But that wasn't even the worst of it. What really threw me was her demand for child support. She wanted me to pay for our son, and she didn't want just the standard amount. No, she wanted to live comfortably off that check for years to come. The kind of money she was asking for could have funded her next shopping spree lifestyle without her lifting a finger. And for a while, I was resigned to it. I mean, I loved the kid. I'd raised him, been his father, and I figured, fine, I'll take the hit for him, even if it means I'll be working double shifts for the next decade. But something kept gnawing at me, especially after that joke about the neighbor's kid. The thought had always been in the back of my head, lingering there, ever since Emma's face froze that night at the dinner table. And with everything that had come out about her cheating, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I asked for a DNA test. It was the last resort, really. I didn't want to believe that the kid I'd raised for 8 years wasn't mine. But after everything Emma had put me through, I had to know for sure. Part of me felt like I was betraying him by even questioning it, but at the same time, I had to protect myself. I wasn't going to let Emma take everything from me, not if there was even the slightest chance that she was lying about this too. The results came in a week later. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the envelope like it was a bomb about to go off. When I finally opened it, I felt like the world dropped out from under me. The test came back negative. The kid I'd been calling my son for nearly a decade wasn't mine. I just sat there, holding the paper, unable to move. There was anger, sure, but more than anything, I felt hollow, empty, like everything I'd built with Emma had been a lie from the very beginning. She'd lied about who she was, who I was, and even who my own son was. It felt like the final betrayal, the one that cut deeper than all the others combined. My lawyer? He was ready. He'd seen this kind of thing before, I guess, because the next steps came quickly. The DNA test blew Emma's whole case apart. Without that kid being mine, there was no way she could demand child support from me. She tried to fight it, of course, threw every excuse in the book at the judge, claiming I was still his father, that I'd raised him, that it didn't matter what the test said. But legally, it did matter. I wasn't on the hook for a single dime. The divorce process dragged on for months after that, but Emma had lost her leverage. We sold the house, and I took my half of the money. I wasn't interested in fighting for more. At that point, I just wanted out. I wanted to be done with her, with the lies, with everything that had turned my life into a nightmare. Once the house was gone, I packed up and moved to another city, far away from the madness that had consumed my life for too long. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I needed distance, both physically and mentally, from everything that had happened. New place, new job, new life. The memories of Emma, of the kid who wasn't mine, of the betrayals, they stayed with me, but I was determined not to let them define me anymore. I wasn't the same man who had made that dumb joke at the dinner table, oblivious to the storm brewing under my own roof. I was different now, maybe a little harder, a little colder, but also smarter. I'd been through the worst, and I'd come out the other side. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Update. It's been a while since I last posted, and a lot has changed since then. If you followed my story up to this point, you know how dark things got. How betrayal, divorce, and revenge became the center of my life. But now, I want to give you all an update because for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm finally in a place where I can breathe again. I've moved on. After the divorce and the house sale, I packed up and left that city. There was no point in staying. Too many memories, too much anger, and too many ghosts. I needed a fresh start, and moving to a new city gave me exactly that. It wasn't easy, starting over never is, but it was necessary. I found a new job, nothing fancy, but enough to pay the bills and keep me busy. And you know what? I've made new friends, built new routines, and started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The past still lingers, of course. There are nights when it all comes flooding back, and I wonder how I could have been so blind for so long. But those moments don't define me anymore. They're just echoes of a life I've left behind. I've learned to focus on the future rather than the past, and it feels damn good. I don't have much contact with Emma anymore. There's nothing left to talk about. The kid, well, it's complicated. I'm not his father, not legally or biologically, but in my heart, part of me will always care about him. He was an innocent bystander in all of this, just as blindsided as I was. But for my own sanity, I had to create distance. Maybe someday, when he's older, we'll talk again. But for now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my own life. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been following my story, whether you've commented, messaged, or just read along quietly. Your support has meant more to me than you'll ever know. When you're going through hell, knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. So thank you. Really, it's been a long, brutal journey, but I'm standing on the other side of it now, and I wouldn't have made it without the encouragement from strangers. People like you who gave me hope when I had none. So, what's next for me? I'm not sure, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm staying focused on the present, trying to enjoy the little things again, things I'd forgotten I could enjoy. I'm healthier, mentally and physically, than I've been in years, and that's something I'm proud of. To anyone who's going through their own version of hell right now, just remember this. You can get through it. It may seem impossible, but I'm living proof that life goes on. You'll heal, you'll grow, and you'll find your peace again. It takes time, but it's worth it. Thanks again to everyone who's stuck by me through this roller coaster of a story. I wish you all success, happiness, and strength, no matter where life takes you. Take care of yourselves, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Your sweet lips. Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together, all alone. I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down low. And you can tell your friend there with you he'll have to go. Kelly and I had met about 6 months ago at a dance club in Petaluma, north of San Francisco. I had gone with a couple of girls I worked with, Marcia and Julie. They wanted someone to help keep the wolves off. They wanted to choose, not be chosen. That was okay with me. I had been feeling melancholy. I'm not sure why. It's like something was going to happen, something that would make me sad. When you are like that, it seems to feed off itself. The girls were dancing and I was sitting at the table, staring into my beer when I sensed a presence next to me. I held still for a minute, I guess hoping whoever it was would go away. Finally, I looked up and immediately forgot my beer. A young lady. In my mind, I never saw a girl or a woman. Strange that. Stood there with a smirk on her face. I looked closer. There was something about her. Something. She wasn't beautiful, but yet she was. She had dishwater blonde hair cut short. A pixie face with a cute upturned nose. Not really tall, maybe 5 feet 6 inches, slender but curvy, probably a little underweight for her height. She had a white blouse with a black skirt. The blouse was my favorite type, kinda off the shoulder with elastic around the top, I guess what you would call a scoop neck. She was leaning over a little bit, ready to say something to me. It was a nice lacy white bra to match the blouse. I was in love for the first time in my life. If you are not too wrapped up in that beer, would you dance with me? What beer? I mumbled as I tried to unwind from the chair. As I stood up, my feet did something with each other, independent of any plan of mine, and I lurched into this mystery that had appeared in front of me. Laughing, she said, You are an even better dancer than what Julie told me," as she pulled me onto the dance floor. Whisper to me. Whisper to me. Tell me, do you love me true? Or is he holding you the way I do? Though love is blind, make up your mind. I've got to know. Should I hang up? Or will you tell him he'll have to go? Luckily for me, the song was fast and loud. I was able to gather my wits and do a credible job with the dance. The next number was a little slower and we were able to talk. Laughing again, she said, "I'm Julie's cousin." She didn't know I was going to be here, but we ran into each other in the restroom. She told me that you were watching out for them, and I thought that was sweet. She was going to introduce us, but a guy she wanted to meet asked her to dance. She pointed to where you were and told me to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Kelly." She smiled as she leaned back and put out her hand. "I'm Mark," I said as I shook hands with her. "I'm sorry I stepped on your foot before we even started dancing." She smiled and said, "You are more than making up for it. You actually dance very well. Could I ask what you were looking at in your beer?" I almost blurted, "There was a tear in my beer," but managed instead to say with some small amount of charm, "I was waiting for you to show up and I didn't want to be bothered by any of the other girls." She stopped dancing for a minute, looking at me with a serious look on her face. She started chuckling, "You're pretty smooth for a guy that can't even stand up without falling over." She leaned in a little closer, putting her arm around me. We sat out a couple of dances and had a beer and got to know about each other. I was 28 and an assistant winemaker at one of the nicer wineries in the Alexander Valley. Marcia and Julie worked in the tasting room. I had gone to UC Davis to get my degree in enology. I dated a few girls, but I told her, "I've only fallen in love once, though." I didn't tell her it was with her. Kelly had gone to school at the University of San Francisco, majoring in marketing. She was working in the marketing department of one of the telecom startups in Petaluma. The bandleader announced that they would play a waltz and then take a break. We stood up and started dancing, a little closer this time, as the band played Tennessee Waltz. As we danced, Kelly at first looked a little sad, then a bit angry. It made me a bit nervous since I was really starting to like her. After the dance, we went out front to get some fresh air. "I love that song," she said. "It always makes me sad, but a little mad too. You know the part where it goes." I was dancing with my darling to the Tennessee Waltz when an old friend I happened to see. I introduced him to my loved one, and while they were dancing, my friend stole my sweetheart from me. How could a girl be with another guy and do that to him? It just makes my blood boil. I felt relieved that it wasn't anything I had done, and actually a little thrilled because it sounded like she would be very loyal. Sweet words to me. I took her hand and didn't say anything, and after a while we went back in. Later she took me home since I had ridden with the girls. Marcia was the designated driver. When we got to my townhouse, we chatted for a minute, and then I got out and went around to her window. I told her how much I enjoyed the evening and asked her if I could take her to dinner the next week. She said she would love to and gave me her phone number. I started walking away, paused, and turned back to her. Kelly, I probably shouldn't say this, but you know I love you, don't you?" Grinning, she answered, "Of course, you dummy. You wear your heart on your sleeve." Shaking her head, but with a smile, she backed her car around and left. "You can't say the words. You can't say the words I want to hear. While you're with another man. If you want me, answer yes or no." "Darling, I will understand." We started dating regularly. That first dinner I was going to take her out on turned out to be dinner at her place. She had the left half of a one-story duplex in Cotati and lived by herself. She rented it furnished, so the furniture didn't reflect her taste. I noticed that it even had old-fashioned shades instead of blinds. She had insisted the owner install curtains for the front window since it was next to the entry door. With the shades down, you could still see shadows, silhouettes really, on the shades at night when someone would pass in front of a light. That first dinner turned out to be quite nice. Kelly had a great sense of humor, a sort of sardonic wit. We laughed a lot, and it turned out she was a great cook. I was rewarded with a somewhat more than chaste kiss goodnight. I had been careful not to mention love again. I didn't want to spook her. I learned my lesson growing up in western Kansas hunting quail and chikar. Too sudden a move scared off the quarry. Not that I considered Kelly quarry. Our relationship grew closer every time we saw each other. Kelly turned out to be a very caring, loving person. We never seemed to fight about anything. She was fun to be with and sexy as hell without trying. We gradually became more intimate, certainly a lot of very hot kisses. Fondling became a regular thing. Passion became a passion for both of us. We had not made love as yet. I felt she would if I pushed it, but I wanted the time to be right. I had a plan. I felt Kelly loved me as much as I did her, even though she hadn't actually said the word as yet. Maybe I was being a little presumptuous, but I felt a marriage proposal would be well received by her. I rounded up in order: an engagement ring, a dozen pink roses, and a beautiful card that said the loving words I had trouble getting off my tongue without twisting them all around. I wanted to surprise her with my proposal. This might have been somewhat rash given what happened that night when I went to change our lives forever. Instead of doing this on an evening when we had something planned, I went over when she wasn't expecting me. She said she was staying in to do her hair, clean the duplex, and watch an old movie. I thought it would be fun to catch her with her hair down, so to speak. Little did I know. Your sweet lips. Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together, all alone. I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down low. And you can tell your friend there with you he'll have to go. I got to her place, found a place to park, and walked to her door. The way the place was set up, you had to walk in front of her front window to get to the door. As I walked past the window, I glanced at the shade. I stopped suddenly in shock at what I saw. The shade was down, but the curtain wasn't pulled. Silhouetted on the shade was the crisp outline of a couple engaged in an apparently passionate embrace. I couldn't see any details, but it was clear, at least, that a very intimate kiss was taking place. I stood there for a long minute staring. I had heard of people saying their brain had frozen in a moment of shock. Now I understood what that was like. My life ended right then. My mouth tasted of ashes. Finally, I pulled myself together, feeling a sudden rage. If I were to suffer, why should I suffer alone? I wanted confrontation. I wanted to throw the ring and the roses in her cheating face. Damn her. I stepped to the door and pushed the button. I heard the doorbell sound and stood there ready to barge in and have my confrontation. I panicked. I couldn't do this. I turned and ran to my car and, as I had done a few years earlier, got the hell out of Dodge. I got to my place, tears streaming down my face as I staggered out of the car. As I opened the door, I noticed that I didn't have the card or the roses. I must have dropped them when I ran from Kelly's apartment. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I realized that I didn't want to be alone then. I guess I was afraid of what I might do. I went to a nearby dive, a country kind of place, and started sucking up a pitcher of beer. I liked this joint because it was totally unpretentious. It was what it was, exactly. After all the posturing I saw in the wine business, it was always a great place for me to just be myself. It was near Guerneville, close to the Russian River, in a stand of pines. It, naturally enough, was called Cabin in the Pines. Its one redeeming feature was a really beautiful pine bar running down one side and pine tables along the other. As a kid growing up in Dodge City, I heard nothing on the radio but country music. Something in the songs, seemingly mostly sad, struck a chord in me. There was a pathos that echoed in some sadness within me. The one really special thing about this bar was a jukebox with the old country songs on them. It had all the great ones: Hank Williams, Faron Young, Jim Reeves, even some of the real old-timers like Tex Tyler, Spade Cooley, and Hank Penny. As I sat there, not exactly nursing my beer, someone played He'll Have to Go by Jim Reeves. This had always been one of my favorites, but for the first time in years, I really listened to the words. They hit me hard. This was what I was feeling. This was what I wanted to tell Kelly. I thought about calling her, but I was afraid of what she might say. I got some notepaper from the guy behind the bar, paper he used to make notes on what he needed to order. I started writing, some tears dropping unnoticed on the paper, and wrote this letter to Kelly. Dear Kelly, you knew from the first day we met how much I loved you. I don't have the words to express the depth of this love. You haven't explicitly said that you loved me, but I have sensed that you do. If I'm wrong, I apologize for my presumptuousness. I came by earlier tonight for what I hoped would be the bright dawn of a great love between us. A forever kind of love. I'm ashamed to say I saw you kissing someone as I passed your front window. The silhouettes on the shade were clear. I couldn't stay. I left. Kelly, I came to see you tonight to surprise you, to propose, to ask your hand in marriage. I guess I haven't really had any right to expect you to see only me. Truthfully, it didn't even occur to me that you would be seeing someone else. But Kelly, dearest, I can't share your heart with another. If it's me you love, you have to tell the man that was there with you that he will have to leave. If you love him, I understand, and it's my failing, not yours, I can't share your love. Again, I'm sorry, but you will have to choose. Yours in love, Mark. P.S. Sorry for the spots on the paper. It must have been the condensation from the beer. I gave up on the beer, went to a grocery store and bought stamps and envelopes, and dropped the letter in the mailbox. I stopped by my place and grabbed a few clothes and my shaving kit and went to the winery. I kept a cot in my office for the busy period during crush and fermentation. I took a shower, grabbed the wine thief, and sucked out a liter decanter of cab that was about ready for bottling. The next morning I talked to Joe Hines, the winemaker, and asked if it would be okay for me to disappear for a couple of days. He was fine with it, and I ran up to a stretch of the Eel River where I had always had good luck fishing. I thought it through, over and over. It always came out the same. Simply put, I loved Kelly. She either loved me or not. she would marry me or not. If not, I would just have to move on. I left very early the next morning and got home around 6. As I put the keys on the table next to the door, I saw an envelope. Picking it up, "My melancholy baby" was written on the outside the envelope. Opening it, I pulled out a letter. It read, "Come to me, my melancholy baby. Cuddle up and don't be blue. All your fears are foolish fancy, maybe. You know, dear, that I'm in love with you. Yours always, Kelly." Stunned, I grabbed the phone, but realized it was too early to call. I went into the bedroom to take a shower and sleep for a couple of hours. As I opened the door, Kelly was sitting on the side of the bed, rubbing her eyes. Hearing the door open, she jumped up and threw herself at me. "Oh God, Mark. I'm so sorry for what you went through. I love you. I love only you. I'm sorry I never told you. I was sure you knew." Then she was kissing me, and we fell on the bed. I didn't stop to figure out what was going on. Later would be time enough for that. Now there was an urgency between us that needed to be satisfied. We explored each other, at first in haste, and then slowly with the touches only lovers have. She was sweet and she was passionate, by turns. Later, lying there entwined, she explained. "As I told you, I wasn't expecting anyone. It was a down evening for me, just to catch up with things. Julie and Tony, you remember. She met him the same night we met at the dance. Anyway, that afternoon he popped the question, and they stopped by to tell me. She was so excited. She was just glowing. Anyway, from what we could figure out, Julie and Tony were in the living room, obviously holding each other close. I was in the kitchen making some coffee. My hair was in curlers and I had an old robe on. We heard the doorbell, but no one was there. Julie looked down and saw the card and the flowers. From the card we saw that it was you that had stopped by, and you must have seen Julie and Tony kissing. God, Mark. I read the card and cried for hours. I tried and tried to call you, but there was no answer. I called Joe at the winery, and he told me you were going fishing for a couple of days. Then the next day I got your letter. I've slept here for the last 2 nights waiting for you to come home. You doofus. You should know you are the only man for me." I got up, somehow knowing that now was not the time to say anything. I got the ring from my billfold and slipped it on her finger. Kissing the ring, then her lips, we sealed a love that would burn brightly forever. I never again had that sadness, that melancholy. I never dwelled on what had happened. Our love was all I needed. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hello, and welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We're thrilled you could join us. We've got an exciting story to tell, and we hope it brings all the drama you're here for. Let's jump into it. Patrick Elliott sneezed as he shifted another box in his late father's storage unit. Dust billowed, catching the weak light filtering through the windows. He paused, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. His eyes fell on an ornate wooden box tucked away in a shadowy corner. "What's this?" he muttered, reaching for it. His fingers traced the intricate carvings, feeling the weight of history in his hands. The latch clicked open with surprising ease. Inside, a single document lay neatly folded. Patrick's brow furrowed as he unfolded it, squinting in the dim light. His eyes widened, then narrowed as he read. What the hell? It was a will. His will. With his signature, clear as day at the bottom. The document declared he'd been dead for 3 months, leaving everything to his wife Christine and a man named Lorenzo McCullough. Patrick's mind raced. How did his signature get there? Who was Lorenzo McCullough? And Christine? His stomach churned at the implications. With shaking hands, he pulled out his phone and carefully photographed the forged will. He replaced it in the box, positioning it exactly as he'd found it. As he locked up the storage unit, his heart pounded so loudly he was sure anyone passing by would hear it. The drive home was a blur. Patrick's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. He pulled into the driveway of their suburban home, its perfectly manicured lawn and cheerful flower beds now seeming like a mockery. He found Christine in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The harsh fluorescent lights glinted off the knife in her hand. She looked up, a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're home early," she said, her voice light and casual. Patrick's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the counter with the photo of the forged will displayed. "Care to explain this, Christine?" Her eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. She set down the knife, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's easier if you don't fight, Patrick. You'll regret everything if you do." Who's Lorenzo McCullough? Patrick demanded, his voice low and controlled despite the rage building inside him. Christine's smirk grew. That's none of your concern. None of my concern? Patrick's voice rose. My name is on a forged will leaving everything I own to you and this man I've never heard of. How is that not my concern? Christine's demeanor shifted, her hostility becoming more apparent. Drop it, Patrick. You have no idea what you're getting into. No, I don't, Patrick agreed, his tone icy. So why don't you enlighten me? Christine's eyes flashed dangerously. You want to play this game? Fine. How about I enlighten your department head about your affair with that graduate student last year? Patrick's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Oh, don't play dumb, Christine sneered. I have emails, hotel receipts. It would be such a shame if your perfect reputation was tarnished. I wonder how quickly they'd fire you. Patrick's mind raced. There was no affair, no graduate student, but he realized with growing horror how easily Christine could fabricate evidence, how she could twist innocent interactions into something sinister. You're bluffing, he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Christine's smile was predatory. Are you willing to bet your career on that? The full weight of her betrayal hit Patrick like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or a forged will. This was about control, about dismantling his entire life. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Christine shrugged, picking up the knife again. Because I can. Because you're boring, Patrick. Predictable. I want more, and Lorenzo can give me that. You won't get away with this, Patrick said. Christine's laugh was cold and mirthless. I already have. This is your final warning, Patrick. Back off, or I'll destroy everything you've worked for. She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Patrick alone with the weight of her threats hanging in the air. For a moment, he stood there, stunned. Then, survival instinct kicked in. He knew he couldn't stay in this house, not with Christine, not when she held so many unknown cards. Moving quietly but quickly, Patrick went to their bedroom. He packed a bag with essentials, clothes, toiletries, his passport. In his study, he gathered critical documents, birth certificate, social security card, bank statements. He downloaded financial records and emails from their shared computer, copying them onto a flash drive. As he worked, he called his friend and lawyer, Theodore Myers. The call went to voicemail. Ted, it's Patrick. I need your help. It's urgent. Call me as soon as you get this. He kept the message vague, aware that Christine might access his phone records. Patrick paused in the study, a thought occurring to him. He set up a hidden camera, positioning it to capture most of the room. If Christine or this Lorenzo character came snooping, he'd have evidence. He heard the shower start upstairs. It was now or never. Patrick slipped out of the house, tossing his packed bag into the trunk of his car. As he pulled out of the driveway, he caught a glimpse of Christine in the upstairs window, wrapped in a towel, her face twisted in fury. He drove, no clear destination in mind, just the burning need to put distance between himself and the life he thought he knew. His mind whirled with plans, with questions, with the beginnings of a strategy to fight back. As the familiar streets of his neighborhood faded in the rearview mirror, Patrick felt a determination settle over him. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a war he intended to win. Patrick pulled into a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. He paid cash for a week's stay, using a false name. The room was dingy and smelled of stale cigarettes, but it would do for now. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, trying to process the events of the day. His phone buzzed, a text from Christine. Where are you? He ignored it, instead pulling out his laptop. He needed to start piecing together what was happening. Who was Lorenzo McCullough? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how was he going to fight back? Patrick opened his email, scanning through months of correspondence. Nothing stood out at first, but then he noticed a pattern. Small discrepancies in their joint account, money moving that he couldn't account for. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Christine. You're making a mistake, Patrick. Come home and we can talk about this. He scoffed, typing out a reply before thinking better of it and deleting it. No, he wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a response. Not yet. Instead, he called his department head, Dr. Saul Godfrey. Patrick, is everything all right? It's rather late, Saul answered, his voice groggy. I'm sorry to disturb you, Saul, Patrick said, trying to keep his voice steady. I need to take a leave of absence. Family emergency. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Of course, Patrick. Take all the time you need. Is there anything I can do? Patrick hesitated. Should he tell Saul about Christine's threats? No, not yet. He needed more information first. No, thank you. I'll keep you updated. After hanging up, Patrick turned back to his laptop. He started a new document, typing out everything he knew so far. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the first rays of dawn crept through the motel windows, Patrick finally allowed himself to close his eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. His dreams were filled with shadowy figures and betrayal, Christine's laughter echoing in the background. He woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and with them, a renewed determination. Patrick showered and changed, then headed out. He needed coffee and a plan. As he sat in a small diner, nursing a cup of bitter coffee, he made a list of his next steps. 1. Find out who Lorenzo McCullough is. 2. Gather evidence of the financial discrepancies. 3. Consult with Ted about legal options. 4. Secure his position at the university. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ted returning his call. Patrick? What's going on? Your message sounded urgent. Patrick took a deep breath. Ted, I need your help. It's Christine. She's trying to steal everything from me. There's a forged will, threats to my career. I don't know what to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Christ, Patrick. Okay, where are you? We need to talk face to face. Patrick hesitated. Could he trust Ted? He'd known him for years, but then again, he'd thought he knew Christine too. I'd rather not say right now. Can we meet somewhere neutral? The coffee shop on 5th and Main? Sure, Patrick. I'll be there in an hour. As Patrick waited for Ted, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time the bell above the door jingled, he tensed, half expecting to see Christine or the mysterious Lorenzo walk in. Finally, Ted arrived, looking worried. Patrick, what the hell is going on? Patrick took a deep breath and began to explain everything. The forged will, Christine's threats, the mysterious Lorenzo McCullough. Ted listened intently, his frown deepening with each new revelation. This is serious, Patrick, Ted said when Patrick finished. We need to move quickly. First things first, we need to secure your assets. I'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze your joint accounts. Then we need to start building a case. Patrick nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since discovering the will. What about Christine's threats to my career? Ted's expression hardened. Empty threats. We'll deal with them if she actually tries anything. For now, focus on gathering evidence. Document everything. And Patrick, be careful. If Christine is capable of this, there's no telling what else she might do. As they parted ways, Patrick felt a mix of emotions. Fear, anger, determination. But most of all, he felt a fierce resolve. Christine and Lorenzo had picked the wrong man to mess with. He would fight back, and he would win. Patrick Elliott pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The neon sign flickered weakly, half its letters burned out. He paid cash for a week's stay, using a false name. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation, but it would do. He sat on the edge of the bed, laptop balanced on his knees. Time to start digging. Who the hell was Lorenzo McCullough? A quick search turned up more than Patrick expected. Lorenzo McCullough, charismatic real estate developer. Handsome bastard, too, with a smile that probably made middle-aged housewives swoon. Patrick's jaw clenched as he scrolled through articles and press releases. But there was something off about McCullough's success. Properties that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Deals that closed suspiciously fast. Patrick dug deeper, his archaeologist's instinct for uncovering buried secrets kicking in. It took hours of sifting through public records and newspaper archives, but a pattern emerged. Lorenzo had a type, wealthy women, usually married. He'd sweep in, charm them, and somehow end up with their money. The women were left broke and humiliated. Son of a bitch, Patrick muttered. He pulled up his own bank records next. There it was, a series of large transfers from their joint account to a company he didn't recognize. A quick search confirmed his suspicion. It was one of Lorenzo's shell companies. Patrick's hands shook with rage as he opened his email. He had to know how deep this went. How long had Christine been betraying him? The answer made him sick. Months of correspondence between Christine and Lorenzo, hidden in a secret folder. They discussed their plan in nauseating detail, how to manipulate Patrick, how to siphon off his money, how to leave him with nothing. Patrick slammed the laptop shut, while rising in his throat. He'd been a fool, blind to what was happening right under his nose. But no more. He was going to fight back, and he was going to win. He reached for his phone, dialing Theodore Myers. Ted? It's Patrick. We need to talk. I've found something. Across town, Christine paced in Lorenzo's sleek downtown apartment. He's gone. Packed a bag and disappeared. Lorenzo lounged on the leather sofa, looking unconcerned. Relax, darling. Where's he going to go? Christine glared at him. You don't know Patrick. He's not as stupid as you think. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. Remember who got you out of that boring life? Christine bit back a retort. She'd made her choice, for better or worse. We need to move faster. Before he figures out what's really going on. Lorenzo stood, pulling her close. Don't worry your pretty little head. I've dealt with his type